Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, I have a return guest, but before I jump into that, I want to share a little bit about, my backstory. For those of you who know me, you know I started out with a corporate job. I was a consultant in a firm, and following law school and graduate business school, and it was just kind of this path, this trajectory I was on. Because when I was in college at tiny Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin, loved the place, but everything was geared, and it's not just them, but colleges in the 80s and maybe the 90s were really geared towards, hey, corporate job. And they would just parade in a lot of people from corporations and say, look at this person, aspire to it. And that's what you knew. And, the things you were aspiring to weren't necessarily there later. 40 years and a gold watch just didn't exist anymore. So today, my returning guest to share about her journey, she was on here talking about podcasting. Sia Yasatornrat was talking about podcasting and building relationships before, and we've become buds. Recently we were on a Zoom call together, and she was kind of sharing her story, and I wanted to say, you got to come on and kind of tell the story. So Sia, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Frank. It's so glad to be. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, good. You have big podcasting opportunities this weekend. You're going to meet childhood crushes, and sounds great. Let's hear your origin story. I mean, I kind of shared mine a little bit, kind of pointed towards corporate America, and it's what ends up happening is not in the brochure necessarily, at least not for everybody.
100%. I could say I grew up in Southern California. And as you can see, I am Asian. So my parents are Asian. And so I grew up in a I'm a first gen born. So I grew up in what you would stereotypically think of as an Asian household. But I say that with asterisks. So my dad is my origin story. He's my inspiration. He and I have very similar values, I think, because of the upbringing. And it's because he didn't graduate past fourth grade in Thailand, somehow self-educate himself to get the GED equivalent. And then I don't know what the heck happened here. It's a little vague. My dad is 86. So obviously this is like really back in the day. So maybe is different, but he founded a university on computer and technology back in like the, late 50s. And there's like an old brochure that I have of my father standing there in front of this old equipment and stuff, which is like absolutely fascinating to me because a man is, he was born poor and he figured it out. And then he saved enough money. I guess he sold off his shares of that university or school and came to America. Mind you, he started a school, right?
Yeah.
He actually had a patent that is very similar to like the coffee machines back in the day where you throw a cup down and all of a sudden the water pours out into it. If you remember those old vending machines.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get the global patent because I think it was already created, but in Thailand it was unique, there. And he came up with it on his own, which is really interesting. But he came to America in the late 50s. And because he couldn't speak English, he couldn't get the credibility. He was a strawberry picker out in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And he took night classes and ended up getting his bachelor's and his almost got his master's at the University of Oregon or Oregon State. I think Oregon State, whatever the Ducks aren't.
Okay, yeah,
whatever
Oregon
they are.
State.
Anyway, so Oregon State University. Okay, I am totally taking a long time, but what I'm saying is this: he went from this kid that was self-taught, started a school on electronics, he had an aptitude for it, and then sold his shares, if you will, into it. Came to America, couldn't get any jobs because he wasn't, quote, American, and was a strawberry picker, went to night school, got his bachelor's and got his master's, right? Or almost got his master's. And to me, that is insane. Or maybe he did get his master's. He did get his master's. Wow, Dad, sorry. But what happened was he ended up getting a job in a fast forward 20, 30 odd years. And he was one of the team leads for the first 4 launches of the space shuttle. So, I mean, the man is incredible. Top secret clearance, worked at Los Alamos in New Mexico. I mean, my dad is just, when he was working, was just amazing. And to me, like, I tear up when I think about it, because when you see someone come from nothing and then make it, and not only make it, but really just made a career and carved a path. And I can't say I don't know what he did up there at Los Alamos, but clearly he had an impact that we may not be aware of. And so when I left corporate America, which, by the way, I was going to get laid off, my job was eliminated, and they said, hey, do you want to look for another job in the company? And I said, no, I'm out. I said, deuces, I can't do this job anymore. And I was in sales for 20 odd years. And for me, if you don't have passion for what you do, whatever it may be, it could be strawberry picking. It could be, who knows what my dad did with the space shuttle people in Los Alamos, or podcasting or selling in technology. If you don't have that passion, you're not going to do it. You're going to be miserable, and your life is too short to live. So I know I'm doing like a really jumpy version of this, but here's where I'm fast forwarding to is I left corporate America after 20 plus years in tech sales. Loved my time, but I was starting to manifest hives. I was physically breaking down because of the stress of being able to perform or not being able to perform. And
when you say perform, meeting quota, closing deals, kind of things, or
exactly. I was my client at the time was in or it still is. They're in telecommunications, and I was literally in charge for United States to try to literally pull out revenue when there was a lull between 4G and 5G ratification, right? So there was no acquisitions going on because the entire industry was waiting to figure out what's the next phase. So everyone's making do with their existing infrastructures and, et cetera, until that moment. Well, I work for a company that sells infrastructure solutions. If no one's spending money, I ain't got no revenue to close deals with. So that's why I was stressing out and breaking out into hives. Well, I decided
and the higher ups didn't care. I mean,
no.
Yeah. I get it. When I was a consultant for not-for-profits, and it's just, you're billing out at $300 an hour. They don't have the money. You can't just, you can't manufacture it. We want you to have the hours, but nobody wants to buy anything. Well, what are you supposed to do? It was horrible.
Even more funny is the pipeline I would have. I'm like, well, we've got a project going in place in 2020. Mind you, this is 2017.
Right.
And they're like, no, you cannot have a 3-year sales cycle. This is not what your job is for. And I'm like, well, that's what it is. So we're at an impasse, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was just something where I felt like I no longer had control. I wasn't loving it anymore. I didn't love the thrill of the selling motion, in this capacity. And so I left. I took the package. No job. I just said, I need time. I need to find my soul again, especially again, when you physically manifest, that's a sign that something's not right in your life. And so I apologize. I just got a thing here. So I took 1.5 years off and traveled. And in that time period, it was 1.5 years. And unfortunately, the reason why there's that half was that last half, 6 months, I had 7 people pass away, very near and dear to me in that time frame. I think it was 6 were in the first 4 months in that. So it was an eye opener for me to realize also, okay, so you're physically failing, emotionally, you lose your identity when you work in corporate for so long, right? You think, and as I mentioned in an earlier conversation with you, if you get rejection when you work for a corporation or some large entity, that rejection is easier to take because you can say, oh, you don't want our product or solution. I'm cool with that. And when I left that, I no longer had that identity, right? It was Sia now. If you're rejecting something, it's Sia you're rejecting. And that was the first time I said, whoa, hold up. I wasn't prepared for this, direct feeling of when you're getting rejected, right? So losing all those people made me realize I need to find meaning and purpose, in whatever I do, whatever job I take on next. And so it was a result of me in that time period learning genealogy. And I was doing my boyfriend's genealogy, doing the research, no DNA stuff. This is like hardcore research and stuff.
Right.
And I realized after the great grandparents, everyone just becomes a birth date, death date, name. No personality, no soul, no heart, no laughter, love, anger. And that's what facilitated me to start our podcast business. Was we have the tools, we have the medium.
Right.
Why don't we document ourselves? We have the ability to show what our personalities are. And that's what inspired me to shift over and do the podcasting business. Is for me, it became my why. My why is to help people facilitate their own legacy, to help them share their own stories. So when you were asking about sharing stories, Frank, I was like, oh, honey, which story do you want me to tell you? Because there's so many, right?
Right.
And that's goes back to networking, and why it's so fun is you're literally doing a mini podcast, mini masterclass with every single conversation you have. So that was my origin story, and I hopefully wasn't too convoluted, but
I mean, how familiar were you with podcasting before you jumped into it?
Not from a technical standpoint. And it's funny, I'm still not technical. I'm still learning the editing process now, just full qualifier. We have staff. Okay. So
I get it. Yeah.
The back end person, but that being said is, I learned so much. I learn in general. That's why just my brain functions is I learn by doing. And so, my business partner, however, had been podcasting for like 7 years prior to, and she's also a serial entrepreneur. So shout out Erin Greger. So I've been fortunate that I have not made a lot of common entrepreneur mistakes, because she's already been there and done that. She's exited twice. So she's extraordinarily knowledgeable. So I guess I cheated my way into entrepreneurship a little bit.
You networked your way into entrepreneurship. That's the way I look at it.
There you go.
What was the biggest challenge in kind of going from the, and before we hit record, we were talking about it, and I didn't have a great morning, just to let the listener, didn't have a great morning, won't get into it. But that's business. If you're in business, you get it. And everybody has bad days. The difference between the entrepreneur and the corporate slave, if you will, as my son puts it, is when you have a bad day as an entrepreneur, it usually affects your income. Now in sales, it might have affected things somewhat, but
Well, no, like you said, when you work for corporate America, if you have a bad day, you're still getting a salary.
Yeah. You still have benefits. You still have what you have. Yeah.
Yep. When you have a bad day as an entrepreneur, you're not getting a paycheck, literally.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like, I didn't realize, Frank, in the world of entrepreneurship, that there is so much self-analysis you do. There's so much self-introspection and bargaining with yourself internally. That was really surprising to me. It's something that's not taught in college.
Right.
It's not something that I don't think is spoken enough about, especially now with the pandemic. I'm hoping we as a society is a little bit more comfortable with saying, I posted last week. I had a bad week last week. I could not, for the life of me, muster the happy Sia energy. I was more of the meh, like I just couldn't muster the energy for whatever reason. And this week, maybe because I am meeting my childhood crushes, I am a little bit more energetic, but
right.
It happens. Yeah. And I think we have to give ourselves grace for that, though, too.
Well, I think when we work in corporate America, and I have been out since 1995.
Oh.
When we work in corporate America, you were probably in junior high.
I was in college. Thank you.
Okay.
Almost graduating.
Yeah. All right. But when you work in corporate America, you have those bad moments. You can kind of commiserate with somebody, right? The boss is mad at you. You go to lunch with a colleague, right? and I remember being out self-employed, those first 6 months, and just like, who will go to lunch with me? Who will go to lunch with me? I was just like, I was so alone,
Yes.
and you don't have that. You don't have that camaraderie when you have to get it from other places.
Well, I think that's the importance of networking, right? So I think, with your organization, I mean, I just love it. That's how we met. Is I got invited to a meeting, and I love the fact that you have to be invitation, because it's a pre-vet, if you will. And I'm the chair of a local organization here in for at least a Dallas chapter, and it is amazing to me how lonely it can be as an entrepreneur for multiple reasons. One big reason that I see, and I am guilty, is we don't want to look like we're failures. We don't want to look like we're not confident in what we're doing. And I think that's the opposite that we should be doing, right? Is no, we should be reaching out to each other saying, dude, I'm having a SHIT day. Help me out here. You know what I mean? Asking for help from each other is so critical.
It's interesting you say that, because in fact, I recorded a podcast earlier this week sharing an experience. I was introduced to somebody last week, and they let it slip that they didn't have any clients. That was my reaction. I'm not like you all, but
well, no, but like, you relate. I feel it.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people would have taken that moment to just kind of to pile on. Well, why am I talking to you? You have no clients. You have nothing for me, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
As an entrepreneur, it was like, you know what, I want to help you. And I just told them, I said, listen, don't ever tell anybody you don't have clients, because nobody wants to be your first client.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about how you spin it so it sounds like you have clients. I'm not telling you to lie and tell them you're a billionaire or anything like that, but just you have experience. You might not have any paying clients, and they don't need to know that. But I contrast that to when I get on calls with people where it's kind of the opposite, where there's this ego. Oh yeah, I quit my job in January and I'm doing 7 figures right now. And I am just totally turned off by that.
Okay, the smart aleck in me, Frank, is 7 figures in what currency?
Well, I always say, do you count the decimals, right? Because they could be making $10,000 in that 7 figures.
Well, I think this as much as I do. Truly successful people, and when I say success, it's how you define it.
Yeah.
Truly successful people, I don't care what it is. If it's like I have 1,000 Beanie Babies and I consider that a success marker, whatever it might be, right? The truly successful people who've achieved goals in their own mindset or whatever they've aspired to are the most humble people out there. The ones that are most willing to share their time, and there's zero ego in it. Those are the ones I will 100%, my radar just goes boop. I need to listen to you. Because when someone removes all ego, that means they're at peace with themselves, and they're proving nothing to no one because they proved it to themselves.
Right. Well, again, back to this guy who just let me know he didn't have any clients, who was looking to get that first client. It was that humility that, here's somebody I can help. Here's somebody I can add value, with somebody coming in, and maybe it's not, hey, I make 7 figures, but, oh, I'm crushing it. Everything's great. Hitting on all cylinders, blah, blah, blah. To me, it's almost like they're making you try to feel bad, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the ploy is. Maybe they're totally true. I don't know. I don't think so.
I think that has to come with the person as you get to know them. Because Frank, you've heard this all the time too, right? You're talking about like so many of these solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, even those in corporate, when they're trying to develop their own personal brand, we're hearing that term, be authentic. It's all about authenticity. And I say authenticity with an asterisk, as with all things. Nothing is extreme black, white.
Sure.
It's authenticity is being true to who you are, but don't vomit over everybody, right? Like, I've got bunions today and they hurt. It's like, no, I don't need to hear that. You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would wonder, someone told me I don't have any clients. I would ask is like, oh, well, thank you for confiding in me. That's got to be a very personal, hard thing to say, and kind of gauge if they go, oh yeah, I told Mary, Billy, and then I know it's kind of like maybe a sympathy ploy, or it could be literally that person, Frank, you don't realize how awesome you are, that people might gravitate to you because you're just a great listener. So maybe that person might have exposed a little bit of themselves.
Yeah, it could be. And thank you. I appreciate that. I think back to somebody I interviewed a couple of years ago, this guy named Tim Scher. He's a psychologist. And when I first got on the phone with him, I just let loose. I mean, he's a psychologist. I just, like I was on his couch. I realized that's a psychiatrist. But it was like, oh my God, Tim, I can't believe I just did that and told you. He says, well, I just find I have that demeanor. And so maybe that was it. But it gets back to, how people show up in the world, and some people show up in the world and it's very off-putting, and some people show up in the world and you kind of want to rally around them. I want to rally around people I can help. If you're doing great, I can't help you, and I don't really. Maybe that's my own hang up. I can't add value to this.
You know, it is funny that you should say that, because like in all this that we're talking about, these are all life experience things. This is stuff that can't be taught in college.
Yeah.
And there's wisdom around that. So, I appreciate you saying that, because I am a simpleton. So if things are going well in my life, I'm just like, oh, I just want to help you, support you. Apparently my personality type is like that's where I just want to cheerlead all day long. But it is something where I have to stop and say, no, I need help, people. Like, I really do need help.
Yeah.
And I admit I had a hard time with that. Why is it so hard? Is it because we don't want to be perceived as, not put together or not with it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Because business is great, but it could always be better. Multi-billion dollar businesses say the same thing. It's great. It could be better. Why can't we say that as entrepreneurs?
Well, Berta Medina and I had a conversation earlier this week. Berta. Berta's been on the show. Yeah, she's awesome. And she's somebody that I can open up to. You're somebody I can open up to. And I just told Berta, I said, you know what? Here's the reality is that we tend to look at our lives in small little sound bites, right? So I could be down because I'm having a bad week, or you're up because you're meeting your childhood crushes. Yeah.
Crushes, multiple. Yes, keep going.
Yeah. But that's just this week, right?
Yeah.
That's just this week. And for me, okay, I didn't have a great week, but the last 2 years have been pretty good, and so we need to step back. And I told her, I said, yeah, I'm a little down. Here are some things, but when I step back and look at where I've come from and what could have happened rolling into the pandemic, I am blessed. I have no right to be disappointed or feeling down, but we're human and we do. So
I think it's a very natural thing though, right, Frank? I mean, there is so much of, like, again, that's why psychiatrists, that's why we're so unique, is our brains are not going to be consistent. No one's brain is the same. And that's what the uniqueness, and that's the variables that make every conversation we have unique, right? It's like almost like a fingerprint, right? Every time we talk, it's a new fingerprint we're creating with each other, and whatever we imprint with that fingerprint can carry on, and that's what builds our network and builds our communities and helps us decide. There are some braggarts. That's what I was thinking when you were describing, the chest thumpers that I'm actually friends with, but it's only because I chose to take the time to penetrate those walls, to understand they have their own issues, much like we all do.
Yeah.
I decided to take the time to get to know them. Now, there are some braggarts that are just never ending. And you're like, okay, I'm going to take you as a once every quarter convo versus someone where I talk to them weekly, monthly, whatever.
Yeah.
I think we have to balance out how much time do we want to invest to develop that relationship?
Right.
It's hard to do.
Well, it is, and you have to kind of balance out. You have to do some mental math in your head, because you can't come out of relationships being always negative energy, right? If it's always taking out of you, then you're just, then you're going to be wiped out. You're going to have run into a deficit. Obviously we're always going to take them in the short term because people need help. but we need to build those reserves back up. But yeah, there are people out there where it's like, oh my gosh, this is an energy suck. And, you know.
You remind me of a song lyric. Frank, here's a question. My ADD brain's totally jumping right now, but here's a question. Have you ever developed sayings, idioms, or found out other things about yourself that you're like, oh, this is something new about myself I didn't realize? Have you ever had that light bulb moment of oh, I didn't realize I was like that?
Probably nothing comes to mind right now, but I'm sure something will.
So I'll give you an example. I didn't realize ever since I've left corporate track, different parts of my personality. If I did a personality test, the personality I was at corporate is not the same personality I'm here now. It's so different. It's so interesting. But maybe it was always there, but I may have suppressed it because of the environment I was in, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a huge idiom person. I will make sayings everywhere. So when you were just talking about that negative energy and being around negative, energy is transferable, okay? Whether we see it or not, you call it aura. I'm not trying to be hippy dippy, but if it's birds of a feather flock together, right?
Yeah.
Those things, all ships rise with the tide. So if you've got a sinking boat and you guys are all moored together and tied, it's going to sink everybody with you, which is why I try so hard to be I'm not going to get along with everyone. I'm not going to bond with everyone, but while we are in each other's spheres, I will try to uplift you for that duration, because I know that if I'm uplifting others, it's coming back to me for those that are willing to give it back. And so there's a song in my head from the Smashing Pumpkins, Disarm. And the opening lines is disarm you with a smile. All it takes is a little smile. It's maybe take a negative Nelly and maybe shift him out of that mode a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, Frank, how do you handle all your groups? You got 70 people in a room, either virtually or, physically. How do you keep everyone's energy positive like that? Because you do a really good job. I'm really impressed with how you cultivate less negative Nellies and more positive energy.
Who's podcasting? Who's interviewing who here? No. I really never thought about it, but I just think I just come in and I just hey, this is, here, here's where I'm at. Right. And I'm not really going to worry about what other people are doing. And I think people just kind of take that cue and go with it. I don't know. So
maybe it's that no judgment.
Could be. I don't know. Yeah.
I think you've got you need to chew on that, because that's your magic genie in a bottle. I think is you have it in you. I think you're doing it innately. Maybe you're just likable. Maybe that's what it is. You're likable.
Maybe. Who knows? Let's, as we wrap up, let's shift gears here. Let's talk about this podcasting company and what you're looking for, types of things you do. How can people help you so you don't have to go back and work as a corporate slave? I was going to say work for the man, but that's so politically incorrect anymore.
I know, work for the entity.
Right. Yeah.
Borg.
Yes.
Or I used to work at Disney, work for the rat. So Innovation Media Enterprises is my company, and it is the way I describe it, we're the easy button for all things podcasting. So we're very niched, and we do that intentionally. So we either will augment either an existing organization's marketing department to execute on their podcast strategy, or we will augment marketing agencies, PR agencies that want to offer podcasting as an additional service for their clients. And of course, we have a direct relationship with clients as well, and we'll produce their podcast for them. It includes everything from strategy, consulting, production, and marketing collateral material around the podcast. So when I say that, it's marketing for the podcast. So we will make the audiograms, we'll help you with the posts, but you have to work with a social media agency, marketing agency to execute on that side of it. So it's just, again, for anyone that wants to do a podcast, but they just want to show up, record, and disappear, and then it comes back with a nice little blue, box and bow. That's what we do for our clients.
Gotcha. Best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, I'm always on LinkedIn. So if you guys just hit SYYA on LinkedIn, I will pop up. Unless there is someone else like Swedish Yo-Yo Association, I don't think they're on LinkedIn, so that should be okay. If you do Google me, I think they do pop up before me, which it saddens me. But you can find me also occasionally on Twitter. It's at I am S Yasso. Occasionally on Instagram, I am at S Yasso, but 100% on LinkedIn or innovationmediaenterprises.com.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time today. This was very inspiring. I'm having a good day now.
Oh, thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.